I remember that moment as if it were etched in glass, fragile yet unbreakable in my memory. It was at the wedding reception, in the opulent banquet hall of the Alpharetta Country Club, where the air was thick with the scent of white roses and blue hydrangeas. The lights twinkled like distant stars, casting a soft glow over the 120 guests, most of whom I didn't know, courtesy of the Chesterton family's extensive social circle. My daughter Zinaya looked radiant in her lace gown, her dark curls cascading down her back, her eyes sparkling with what I hoped was genuine joy. Beside her sat Sterling, her new husband, tall and polished in his tailored tuxedo, his smile a perfect mask of charm. The toasts had flowed like champagne, each one more elaborate than the last, praising the union of two prominent Atlanta families, or at least, that's how the Chestertons saw it. We, the Vances, were the outsiders, the common folk, as I suspected they whispered behind our backs. But I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on Zinaya's happiness. She had met Sterling 3 years earlier at a corporate mixer, coming home that night with stars in her eyes. "Mama, I met someone incredible," she'd said, her voice breathless. And incredible he seemed, wealthy, educated, from an old Atlanta family that had thrived even before the civil rights era. The kind of black folks who summered in Sag Harbor or Martha's Vineyard, looking down on those who didn't. But as the evening wore on, the gift-giving began. And that's when the facade cracked. Genevieve Chesterton, Sterling's mother, a widow who had parlayed her late husband's inheritance into a chain of elite beauty salons, rose with theatrical flair. She was a woman of sharp angles and sharper judgments, dressed in a silk gown that screamed old money. In her hands was a gilded box, the size of a small suitcase, tied with ribbons that she untied with deliberate slowness, savoring the attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying across the hall like a command, "I have prepared something special for our dear bride. Practical, useful for the household." The lid lifted, and from the rustling tissue paper emerged a pristine white apron and matching cap, made of expensive linen, embroidered with Zinaya's name in elegant script and the stylized Chesterton family crest below it. The hall fell silent, the kind of quiet where you could hear a pin drop, or in this case, the subtle gasps of those who understood the implication. Given our history in this country, the imagery was unmistakable. It wasn't just a gift. It was a declaration, a subtle or not so subtle reminder of place and power. "So that our little bride looks dignified even in her domestic chores," Genevieve sang out, her smile dripping with faux sweetness. "In our family, even the help dresses impeccably." Her girlfriends, clustered at a nearby table, tittered behind manicured hands, their laughter like shards of ice. I watched Zinaya's face crumple, her eyes filling with tears that she blinked back furiously. Her knuckles turned white as she clutched the fabric, trying to maintain composure, and then Sterling, my new son-in-law, approached, taking the apron from his mother. He turned it over in his hands, inspecting it with a grin that matched hers. "Excellent, Mom," he said, his voice loud enough for the room to hear. "She'll find a use for this around the house." In that instant, something primal stirred within me, a rage that had lain dormant for 6 decades. It was the fierce, ancient fury of a mother protecting her cub, my baby girl, humiliated on her wedding day and her husband complicit in it. I felt my blood boil, my hands tremble, but I held back, for now. The story of how we got here, and what I did next, is one of sacrifice, strategy, and unyielding love. But to understand it fully, we must go back, 6 months before this fateful night, to a cold apartment in West End where the seeds of my resolve were planted. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I visited my older sister, Ida, in our parents' old 2-bedroom apartment. The place hadn't changed much since our childhood, faded, wallpaper peeling at the edges, the same creaky wooden floors that echoed with memories of laughter and arguments. But since Mama passed away 2 years ago, the warmth had fled, leaving behind a hollow chill that seeped into your bones. Ida was in the kitchen, fussing with the kettle, brewing chamomile tea. Her hands, rough and calloused with broken nails, trembled from exhaustion. At 62, she looked older than her years, lines etched deep into her face from a life of hardships. We sat at the small formica table, the one where we'd shared so many secrets growing up. I was the younger sister, the star of the family, tall, statuesque, with a sculpted profile and regal posture that turned heads. At 22, I'd married Reginald Vance, a successful contractor whose construction business boomed in the post-war era. For 20 years, I lived like a baroness in a sprawling mansion in Buckhead. A private driver ferried me to boutiques on Peachtree Street. A housekeeper maintained the pristine home, and a gardener tended to the azaleas that bloomed in riotous colors each spring. It was a life of luxury, luncheons with society ladies, charity galas, and vacations to the Bahamas. But beneath the glamour was a hollow core. You know, Vandra, what the scariest part is? Ita said that day, staring into her cup as if it held the answers to life's cruelties. Her voice was low, laced with a bitterness that had festered for years. It wasn't even that he had women on the side. No, that was almost expected in our circles. It was the realization that for 20 years, I lived in a stranger's house, walking on eggshells. Everything around me existed only by his mercy. And when that mercy ran out, he kicked me out like a stray cat he was tired of feeding. Her story poured out like a dam breaking. After her divorce, she discovered the harsh truth. The house was in her father-in-law's name. The cars leased through Reginald's company, and the bank account solely his. 20 years of marriage, 3 children raised to adulthood, hundreds of business, dinners hosted for his partners, and she walked away with nothing. At 42, she moved back into our parents' cramped apartment with 3 teenagers and an empty wallet. She took odd jobs, cleaning houses, sewing alterations to make ends meet, her dreams shattered. I listened, my heart aching for her. Ida had always been the responsible one, the caretaker while I chased the spotlight. But now, seeing her diminished, it mirrored my own buried fears. My marriage to Reginald hadn't been abusive, but it was transactional, laced with subtle controls. He dictated our social calendar, our finances, even my wardrobe. Respect? That was a luxury I never fully claimed. When I mentioned Zanaya's upcoming marriage to Sterling, Ida's face twisted in horror. She grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Vandra, honey, don't let her repeat my fate. Do something. I beg you. Her eyes, usually dulled by resignation, burned with urgency. That night, as I tossed and turned on the lumpy guest bed, her words haunted me. The image of Ida hunched over her cold tea replayed like a ghost in my mind. I ran numbers and scenarios through my head. What if Sterling turned out like Reginald? What if the Chestertons' wealth became a weapon rather than a blessing? Zanaya had always been my pride and joy, the youngest of my 3 children, with a spirit as vibrant as a Georgia sunrise. She worked as a graphic designer at a midtown firm, independent and ambitious. Meeting Sterling at that mixer had seemed like a fairy tale. He was charming, attentive, showering her with gifts and weekends away. But as their relationship deepened, I noticed cracks. Our first family meeting with the Chestertons was at a trendy bistro in Midtown. Genevieve arrived 30 minutes late, barely glancing at me as she mumbled an excuse about traffic on Peachtree Street. From then on, I was Xenia's mother, a faceless appendage, unworthy of direct address. Watching Genevieve and Sterling interact, I caught the subtle dynamics, the conspiratorial smirks they exchanged, the knowing glances over our heads, as if sharing a private joke about us common folk. It rankled, but I said nothing, not wanting to spoil Zinnia's happiness. Then, 6 months before the wedding, Zinnia came home one evening, quiet and deflated. She slumped at our kitchen table, the same one, where we'd dissected joys and troubles for years, picking at the tablecloth with her fingernail. His mother said, "I really ought to learn how to cook up to their family's standards," she mumbled. Her voice barely above a whisper. She said they have their own way of doing things. My guard went up immediately. "And what did Sterling say?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Zanaya hesitated, then sighed. He said, "Mom's right. You need to try harder." That night I lay awake, staring at a crack in the ceiling that spider-webbed like my growing doubts. By morning, a vow had solidified in my heart. My daughter would not repeat Ida's fate. She would not become a woman forever silent, forever enduring. I needed to act, to give her a safety net, something that was hers alone. Through an acquaintance, I found Thaddeus Marshall, an old legal shark from downtown Atlanta who knew every loophole in the book. His office was cluttered with stacks of files and the faint smell of cigar smoke. I laid out my plan, to buy a house exclusively in Zinaya's name, pre-marriage, so it remained her separate property. He adjusted his glasses, peering at me over the rims. "Miss Vance, do you understand the consequences?" This could complicate their marital life. Trusts deeds, it's not romantic. I understand, I cut him off, my voice steady, because I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Thaddeus nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. We discussed the logistics, a deed of trust, ensuring the property couldn't be claimed as marital assets without her consent. It was a shield, forged in legalese against the uncertainties of love turned sour. But dreams required funds, and I didn't have big money. For 15 years, I'd hustled with homemade baked goods, custom cakes, sweet potato pies for local cafes. Every dime earned through sleepless nights by the oven, flour-dusted hands kneading dough until dawn. It was honest work, but it barely covered the bills in our modest West End home. To make this happen, sacrifices were inevitable. First, I delved into Mama's jewelry box, the one tucked away in the attic like a time capsule. Inside were remnants of our family's history. A heavy gold chain Daddy wore on special occasions, Grandma's antique garnet earrings that caught the light like drops of blood, and Daddy's wedding band with its embedded sapphire, given to Mama on their silver anniversary. Each piece held memories, weddings, birthdays, quiet evenings by the fire. I visited 3 pawn shops, each seedier than the last, before settling on the 4th. The appraiser, a grizzled man with kind eyes, sighed as he examined them. "You sure about this? These have memories attached," I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and walked out with $8,000 in cash. That night, tucking the empty box away, I whispered into the dark, "Forgive me, Mama and Daddy, but this is for Zenaya. You understand?" Next came my car, a reliable 2015 Toyota Camry that had ferried me through countless deliveries and family outings. I listed it online, and a young couple from Marietta came to inspect it, haggling over minor dents. They handed over $9,000, better than nothing. From then on, I switched to MARTA buses and overcrowded trains, lugging bags of ingredients through the humid Atlanta mornings. To boost my income, I loaded up on orders. To my usual cakes, I added a morning pastry run for a coffee shop in Buckhead, eclairs, croissants, muffins. Up at 4 a.m., the first batch browning by 5. They paid pennies, an extra $500 a week, but every penny counted toward Zenaya's future. Zenaya started noticing the changes. "Mama, you look pale." "Have you lost weight?" she'd ask, concern furrowing her brow. "Oh, it's nothing, baby. Just lots of orders. Holiday season is coming up," I'd wave it off with a smile. It was too early for her to know the truth. Everything in its own time. With the funds accumulating, I connected with a realtor named Mrs. Higgins, a warm woman with a client recommendation. God bless her, she understood my urgency without prying. We scoured the suburbs, houses in Stone Mountain, Smyrna, townhouses in Vinings. The 7th one felt like home at first sight. It was in Decatur, a sturdy craftsman bungalow about 10 minutes from the square. Yellow siding gleamed in the sunlight, a typical southern porch inviting lazy afternoons. In the yard stood an old spreading oak tree, its branches like protective arms, and hydrangea bushes lined the fence in bursts of purple and blue. The iron gate creaked welcomingly as we entered. "The owners are moving to D.C., selling fast," Mrs. Higgins chirped. Fresh renovations, move-in ready. Inside, it smelled of pine floors and fresh paint. The living room boasted a bay window that flooded the space with light. The kitchen was spacious, not like my cramped closet at home, with granite counters and room for family gatherings. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms, the master with a big window overlooking that majestic oak. I closed my eyes and envisioned Zenaya there, safe and serene, a cup of morning coffee in hand. "I'll take it," I said, not bargaining. $350,000, the sum astronomical but necessary. I paid the down payment in cash and took out a mortgage for the rest. $2,700 a month for 15 years, more than half my income. But I would manage. I had to. As the paperwork progressed, my resolve hardened. This wasn't just a house. It was independence, a bulwark against the smirks and subtle dominances I'd witnessed. Ida's warning echoed, "Don't let her repeat my fate." And I wouldn't. Little did I know, the true test would come at the wedding, where that apron would ignite the spark, leading to revelations and battles I could scarcely imagine. The wedding day arrived like a storm wrapped in silk and champagne. The Alpharetta Country Club had been transformed into a vision of elegance. Long tables draped in ivory linen, centerpieces overflowing with white, roses and blue hydrangeas that matched the bridesmaids' dresses, crystal glasses catching the golden Afternoon light. Filtering through tall windows, 120 guests filled the banquet hall. Most of them from the Chesterton side, business associates, salon clients, old money families from Cascade, Heights, and Collier Hills. I recognized maybe 20 faces. The rest smiled politely at me while whispering behind their programs. Zinaya was breathtaking. The lace gown hugged her figure like it had been sewn onto her by angels, her veil trailing behind her as she walked down the aisle on my arm. I remember the weight of her hand on mine, light, trembling just a little. When I placed her hand in Sterling's, he gave me that polished smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes, and whispered, "Thank you, Mrs. Vance." I nodded, took my seat in the front row, and tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. The ceremony was beautiful. Vows exchanged, rings slipped on fingers, the pastor's voice echoing with promises of love and cherish. I wiped tears discreetly, telling myself they were tears of joy. After the kiss, the applause thundered, and the newlyweds floated down the aisle to the string quartet. Playing 1,000 Years, I followed the procession outside for photos, smiling until my cheeks ached, posing with people whose names I barely knew. Inside the reception hall, the mood was festive. Champagne flowed, the DJ spun classic soul mixed with modern R&B, and children darted between tables. Genevieve Chesterton held court near the head table, her emerald silk gown shimmering under the chandeliers, a glass of Prosecco permanently in her hand. She fluttered from group to group, announcing to anyone who would listen exactly how much this celebration had cost. "The flowers alone were flown in from Ecuador," she'd say loudly. "And the cake, 6 tiers, Italian buttercream, hand-painted lace to match the dress. Each detail punctuated, with a satisfied little laugh, as if the price tag itself was proof of love." I sat at a table near the edge, watching my daughter dance with her new husband. Sterling moved well, guiding Zinaya smoothly across the floor, dipping her dramatically to delighted applause. She laughed, head thrown back, curls bouncing. For a moment, I let myself believe it would all be fine. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe the smirks and comments were just my imagination. Maybe old Atlanta money came with quirks, but love would smooth the edges. Then came the gifts. The MC, a cousin of Sterling's with a booming voice, announced that it was time for special presentations from the parents. My gift was simple, a velvet envelope containing the house documents, tucked safely in my purse. I had planned to give it privately, maybe during the send-off, but I hadn't decided yet. First, the Chestertons would go. Genevieve rose with the confidence of a woman used to center stage. She signaled to a waiter, who brought forward a large gilded box tied with wide satin ribbons. Cameras flashed. Guests leaned forward. She carried it herself, slowly, deliberately, like a queen presenting a treasure. Sterling stood beside Zinnia, one arm around her waist, smiling that same conspiratorial smile I'd seen too many times. "My dear family and friends," Genevieve began, her voice carrying effortlessly. "As the mother of the groom, I wanted to give our beautiful bride something truly special, something practical, something that will be useful in her new life as a wife and, one day soon, God willing, a mother." She paused for effect, letting the anticipation build. Then, with theatrical slowness, she untied the ribbons. The box opened with a soft rustle of tissue paper. She reached in and lifted out the contents, a pristine white linen apron, expensive and immaculate, embroidered across the chest in elegant gold script with Zinaya, and, beneath it, the stylized Chesterton family crest, a lion rampant on a shield. Next came the matching cap, starched and frilled. The room went deathly quiet. In the American South, especially among Black families whose grandparents or great-grandparents had survived. Domestic service, sharecropping or worse, the symbolism hit like a slap. This was not a quirky heirloom. This was a message, a reminder of hierarchy, of who served and who was served. Genevieve held the apron up high so everyone could see, turning it slowly like a fashion model. "So our little bride looks dignified even when she's doing her domestic chores," she sang out, her smile wide and triumphant. In the Chesterton family, even the help dresses impeccably. A ripple of nervous laughter came from her circle of friends, wealthy women in designer gowns who covered their mouths with manicured fingers. A few gasps escaped from other tables. Someone dropped a fork. The clink echoed like a gunshot. I looked at Zinaya. Her face had drained of color, Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill over the carefully applied mascara. Her hands clutched the fabric so tightly her knuckles blanched. She tried to smile. Lord, how she tried, but her lips trembled, betraying her. And then Sterling stepped forward. He took the apron from his mother, held it up, turned it over as if inspecting fine craftsmanship. His grin widened, matching hers perfectly. "Excellent, Mom," he said, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "She'll find a use for this around the house." The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples of shock spread outward. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. An older aunt from Chicago muttered, "Well, I'll be damned," but no one spoke up. Not yet. Inside me, something ancient and fierce woke up fully. The primal rage of a mother bear whose cub has been threatened. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. My hands shook, but I folded them in my lap and breathed slowly. Not yet. Wait for the moment. The MC cleared his throat awkwardly and tried to move things along. And now a gift from the bride's family? All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, smoothing my navy lace dress, feeling every gaze in the room. My legs felt unsteady, but my voice, thank God, did not waver. I reached into my purse and withdrew the velvet envelope. Walking to the head table, I handed it to Zanaya with both hands. "Open it, baby girl," I said softly, but loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Zanaya's fingers fumbled with the clasp. She pulled out the folded documents, unfolded the top sheet, and began to read aloud in a voice that started shaky but grew stronger. Deed of trust. Property type, residential. Address, 15 Oakview Lane, Decatur, Georgia. Owner, Zanaya A. Vance. A murmur swept the room. I stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder, and looked directly at Sterling. His smile had frozen halfway off his face. "This means," I continued, my voice clear and steady, "that my daughter has her own house, registered solely in her name, purchased and titled before the marriage." Zanaya turned to the next page, her eyes widening. Title transfer registered prior to marriage. The property is classified as separate property of the owner. Someone at the back let out a low whistle. The Chicago aunt spoke up loudly to her neighbor. "Well, I'll be damned twice. Good job, Mama. That's the right move. I tell my daughters the same thing. Keep something in your own name, so you don't cry later." Sparse applause began, then grew. A few guests shouted, "Bravo!" and "Now that's a mother." The tide turned in an instant. Genevieve stood rooted to the spot, apron still dangling from her hand, her face cycling from pale shock to furious crimson. Her expensive foundation couldn't hide the blotches. Sterling's mouth hung slightly open, the grin gone completely. He looked from me to Zanaya and back again, as if trying to process what had just happened. Genevieve recovered first. She forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. How thoughtful. Though I'm sure the young couple will want to discuss living arrangements, more suitable for their station. But the damage was done. The apron, once held aloft like a trophy, now looked ridiculous, evidence of cruelty dressed as tradition. Guests averted their eyes from Genevieve. Conversations restarted in hushed, excited tones. The power in the room had shifted, and everyone felt it. Later, as the newlyweds prepared to leave for their honeymoon in Jamaica, Genevieve cornered us near the exit. Her smile was tight, her eyes cold. "I do hope you enjoy Turkey, or wherever it is you're going," she hissed. Glancing at the itinerary she clearly knew by heart. "But when you return, we will discuss the housing question properly. They are not going to rot in some bungalow in Decatur." Zanaya, still in her wedding gown, straightened her spine. For the first time that night, I saw steel in her eyes. "We have a place to live, Genevieve," she said clearly. "In my house. And it is not a shack." Genevieve's lips pursed until they nearly disappeared. "We shall see, darling. We shall see." The black BMW carrying the newlyweds pulled away, taillights disappearing into the humid Georgia night. I stood at the entrance long after they were gone, replaying the evening in my mind. Pride and fear wrestled inside me. Pride that I had protected my child. Fear of what came next. Because I knew Genevieve and Sterling would not let this go quietly. 2 days later, at 2 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Zanaya's name. I answered immediately. "We made it to the resort," she said, her voice small and strained. A long pause. "Mama? Sterling hasn't spoken to me since we left the airport." My heart sank. "Baby, listen to me carefully. A man who punishes his wife with silence because she has security, that is not love. That is control. Do you feel the difference?" But he's upset. His mother was embarrassed. His mother humiliated you in front of everyone, and he applauded it. Now he's sulking because you have a roof that doesn't depend on his goodwill. Think about that. The days that followed were agonizing. Xenia called in whispers, afraid Sterling would overhear. She described small incidents, how he criticized her choice of restaurant, how he questioned why she still used her maiden name professionally, how he suggested she return the house deed as a gesture of trust. On the 5th day, she broke down sobbing over the phone. "We had a terrible fight, Mama. He accused me of being ungrateful. Said you were manipulative for buying the house without telling him. He wants me to sell it and put the money into a joint account for a bigger place, one we choose together. He said if I don't trust my own husband, I shouldn't have married him. I chose my words like a surgeon chooses a scalpel. What he's doing, baby, is emotional blackmail. Trust is not surrendering everything so you're left vulnerable. Trust is when your partner respects what is yours." When they returned, both mothers waited at Hartsfield-Jackson arrivals, me on one side of the barrier, Genevieve on the other, like rival queens. The newlyweds emerged separately. Sterling pushed the luggage cart ahead, jaw tight. Xenia trailed behind with just her backpack, eyes downcast. Genevieve immediately launched into plans for a celebratory dinner at a high-end steakhouse. "We need to discuss domestic arrangements properly now," she chirped. "I'm tired," Sterling muttered. Xenia cut in quietly but firmly. "I want to go home." Genevieve's smile faltered. "To that little place your mother bought to manipulate you." Xenia lifted her chin. "To my house, Genevieve, the one in my name, where my husband and I will live. And if Sterling doesn't want that, then we have bigger problems than choosing a restaurant." Sterling's jaw clenched so hard I saw the muscle jump. He didn't speak the entire drive. I followed in a taxi, heart pounding. When we reached Oakview Lane, the evening sun painted the yellow siding gold. The hydrangeas were in full bloom, and the old oak stood majestic against the sky. Xenia paused at the gate, exhaling softly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Sterling walked through the rooms with his hands in his pockets, face sour. "It's too small. Ceilings are low. Commute to Midtown is 40 minutes in traffic. Just right for a young family," I countered calmly. He turned to me, eyes narrowed. "This isn't my house." "No," I said, meeting his gaze. "It's your wife's house." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and in that moment, I knew the real battle had only just begun. The first 3 weeks after the honeymoon felt almost normal, like the calm before a storm. You can smell in the air but can't yet see on the horizon. Xenia called me every evening, her voice bright at first, describing how they were settling into the Decatur house. She sent photos, the new king-sized bed delivered to the master bedroom, a sleek gray sofa in the living room, a glass coffee table that reflected the bay window's light. "We're going for modern minimalism," she said proudly. "Sterling says it's more sophisticated." I smiled into the phone and said all the right things, but something twisted in my chest. Minimalism. My daughter had always loved. Color, bright throw pillows, knitted afghans from Mama, shelves overflowing with books and plants that trailed green fingers across every surface. Where were those things now? 3 weeks after they moved in, I decided to surprise her. I baked her favorite lemon pound cake, wrapped it carefully, bought a bouquet of sunflowers from the DeKalb Farmers Market, and took the Marta to Decatur. The August heat pressed down like a wet blanket. As I walked the last 3 blocks to Oakview Lane, when I turned the corner, the house looked perfect from the outside. Yellow siding glowing, hydrangeas blooming in riotous purple, the old oak spreading its shade. I smiled despite myself. This was why I had sacrificed everything. Xenia opened the door in a wrinkled, oversized t-shirt, hair pulled back messily, eyes shadowed with fatigue. She hugged me tightly, but I felt the hesitation in her body. "Mama, you didn't have to come all this way." "I missed my baby," I said, stepping inside. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and nothing else, no lingering scent of her vanilla candles, no warmth of cooking. The living room was exactly as in the photos, gray sofa, glass table, bare white walls. No books, no plants, no photos yet. It looked like a model home, not a lived-in nest. "Where are your things, sweetheart?" I asked, setting the cake on the kitchen counter. "Your books? Those pretty throws you knitted? Your pothos and fiddle leaf fig?" Xenia glanced toward the stairs as if Sterling might appear any second. "Oh, Sterling says all that stuff is clutter. We're doing minimalism now. It's cleaner, more grown up." I forced a nod, but inside I felt the first real chill. Grown up. At 26, my vibrant daughter was being told that joy was clutter. That afternoon, while Sterling was still at work, we sat on the porch swing under the oak. Zinnia picked at her nails, a habit she'd had since childhood when something worried her. "He's been going to his mother's every Sunday," she said quietly. "Stays until late, says he needs space to decompress from the week." "Every Sunday?" I asked. She nodded. Genevieve declared that until I come out of my cave, I'm not welcome at family events. "So he goes alone." I reached for her hand. "Baby, this is your house. You get to decide how it feels. If you want books and plants and color, you put them here. Marriage isn't one person erasing the other." She gave a small, sad smile. "I know, Mama, I'm trying." But trying, I would learn, was not enough against a determined tide. The changes came gradually, the way erosion carves a canyon, one grain of sand at a time until the landscape is unrecognizable. First it was the wardrobe. Zinnia had always loved bold colors, flowing dresses, statement earrings. One day in September, I noticed she was wearing only black, gray, and beige. "Sterling says at my age, I should dress more respectfully," she explained when I asked. "More elegant, less flashy." "Your age?" I repeated, incredulous. "You're 26. She shrugged, eyes on the floor. Then came the friends. Kesha, her best friend since Spelman, called me in tears one October afternoon. "Miss Vandra, what is going on with Zinnia? She's ghosting everybody. I invited her to brunch 3 times and she keeps saying, Sterling doesn't want her hanging out with single women. He says we're a bad influence." I felt ice form in my veins. Isolation, one of the oldest tactics in the book. The house itself began to reflect the control. Every surface gleamed, but it was a cold gleam. No magnets on the fridge, no scattered mail on the counter, no shoes by the door. Sterling inspected when he came home, running a finger along shelves, checking for dust. If he found any, his silence lasted hours. One Thursday in November, I felt a restlessness I couldn't shake. I loaded groceries into reusable bags, collards, chicken for frying, ingredients for cornbread, and decided to surprise her again. I rang the bell. No answer. Rang again. Still nothing. I used my spare key. The house was dim, curtains drawn against the gray November light. The air felt stale, heavy. I called her name softly. Silence. I climbed the stairs slowly, heart beginning to pound. The bedroom door was closed. I knocked. No response. Turned the knob. Zinnia was sitting on the floor beside the window, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped around them. She rocked gently, staring through the gap in the curtains at the bare branches of the oak. Her face was blank, eyes red-rimmed. I lowered myself to the cold hardwood beside her. "Baby girl," I whispered. "What happened?" She didn't look at me for a long moment. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, she said 2 words that turned my blood to ice. "I'm pregnant." The room spun. Joy and terror collided inside me. 2 months along, she continued, still staring outside. "Sterling knows. His verdict is final. I quit work immediately, stay home, raise the child. And we sell the house. He says there's no point rotting out here in the boonies. We'll use the money from the sale plus his savings to buy a 3-bedroom condo in Buckhead, closer to his mother. Title in both our names. We're a real family now," he said. I took her cold hand in mine. "And what did you say?" "That I'm not ready to quit my job. That I love this house. That I want to make decisions together." Her voice cracked. He got quiet. That scary quiet. Then he said, "If I can't trust him now that I'm carrying his child, maybe we made a mistake marrying." I closed my eyes, breathing through the fury. Emotional blackmail, escalating. The next morning, I drove her to Thaddeus Marshall's office for an urgent appointment. Sterling was at work. We had a narrow window. Zinnia sat in the leather chair opposite the lawyer, hands folded protectively over her still flat stomach. She admitted, voice trembling, that she had already signed some papers Sterling brought home. He said they were just preliminary forms for a realtor. Nothing binding. Thaddeus studied the documents, grunting. Preliminary letter of intent. No legal force without notarized closing of the actual sale contract. You can withdraw at any time without penalty. He leaned forward. "But the main point, young lady, is this. The house is deeded exclusively to you. To sell it, your personal presence and voluntary consent are required at closing. The closing attorney is legally obligated to confirm you are acting freely, without coercion. Your husband has zero legal rights over this property. None. Zinnia whispered. He'll say I don't trust him. Thaddeus removed his glasses, looked her straight in the eye. You are afraid of your husband's reaction to you protecting yourself. Does that not strike you as a serious problem? He slid a business card across the desk. Marina Davis, best family law attorney in the city. If it comes to separation or divorce, call her immediately. We left the office in silence. Outside, the November wind whipped dead leaves across the sidewalk. Zinnia clutched the card like a lifeline. That evening, I stayed to cook and keep her company while she worked late on a design deadline. At noon the next day, the front door nearly flew off its hinges. Sterling stormed in, still in yesterday's clothes, reeking of liquor and cigarette smoke, scents I'd never associated with him before. His eyes were bloodshot, face twisted. Where is she? He demanded. At work, I said calmly, wiping my hands on a dish towel. Like responsible adults do. He jabbed a finger at me. This is all your fault. That damn house. You turned my wife against me. I didn't turn her against anyone. I gave her protection, and you're treating her like property. He stepped closer, breath hot in my face. Zinnia is my wife. The house will be sold. We will move where I decide. The house is in Zinnia's name alone. She would have to voluntarily sign it away. His face darkened to purple. She already signed the preliminary papers. Those are worthless without her at closing, I said. We confirmed that yesterday. The rage exploded. He punched the drywall beside my head. Plaster crumbled. My pregnant wife is running around to lawyers behind my back? Not behind your back, I said, voice steady despite my racing heart. For protection. Because a loving husband does not intimidate, isolate, or try to strip his wife of security. He sneered. You're just a bitter old woman who wants her daughter to end up alone and broke like you. I drew myself up. My late husband never once raised his voice at me, never made me doubt my worth. That young man is love. What you're offering is ownership. I picked up my purse. At the door, I turned back. And remember this, Sterling. If you ever lay a hand on my daughter, I will bury you myself. That is not a threat. That is a mother's promise. I took the train home, hands shaking, and immediately called Zinnia to warn her. She listened in silence, then said, Enough. Mama, I'm tired of hiding in my own house. I'm going to talk to him tonight, like adults. I begged her to wait, to let me come over. She refused, stubborn just like her father. At midnight, my phone rang. Zinnia's voice was shredded with sobs. Mama, come get me, please. I threw a coat over my housecoat and called an Uber. The 40-minute ride felt eternal. When we pulled up, the front door stood wide open, lights blazing. Zinnia sat on the porch steps, shaking uncontrollably. A small overnight bag beside her. I wrapped her in my arms. Shh, baby, I'm here. It's not over, she whispered against my shoulder. It's just beginning. We talked in my sister Ida's kitchen until the sun rose, steam from strong coffee curling between us. Zinnia laid it all out. How Sterling checked her phone at night, scrolling through texts. How he demanded passwords to everything, email, Instagram, banking apps. How he flew into rages if she didn't reply to a text within 10 minutes. How he criticized her body. You're letting yourself go already? Though the pregnancy barely showed. How Genevieve dropped by unannounced to inspect, leaving snide notes about dust or dishes. How the ultimatum had hardened. Quit your job, sell the house, submit. This is abuse, I said plainly. Psychological now, but it escalates. She nodded, tears falling into her coffee. The next evening I left, but made her promise to call every 2 hours. At 11 p.m. the call came, panic in her voice. Mama, he locked me in the bedroom. We fought about the house again. He took the key, locked the door from outside, said cool off and think about your behavior, and left. I was already pulling on shoes. Another Uber into the night. The house was dark when I arrived. I let myself in with the spare key. Upstairs, the bedroom door was locked, key still in the outside lock. I turned it. Zinnia was curled on the floor by the bed, arms wrapped around her belly, face streaked with tears. No police, she begged when I reached for my phone. Just take me away, now. We packed in frantic silence, clothes, laptop, prenatal vitamins, the folder with house documents. At 1 a.m. we walked out. Zinnia paused on the porch, looking back. I dreamed of being happy here, she whispered. You will be, I said fiercely. Just not with him. The next 3 days were hell. Sterling bombarded her from unknown numbers, begging. promising therapy, then threatening to take the baby, to ruin her career, to sue for full custody. I reminded her constantly he had no legal ground. We had proof of threats, of false imprisonment. The law was on her side. On the fourth day, Genevieve arrived at Ita's apartment in a mink coat and dark glasses, envelope in hand. I need to speak to Zanea. She doesn't wish to speak to you. I am the grandmother of her child. You were the mother-in-law. That privilege has been revoked. Genevieve pulled out the envelope. If she returns to Sterling, we will gift her a luxury 2-bedroom condo in Midtown, title in her name alone. Far more suitable than this shack. I laughed bitterly. You think you can buy my daughter? It's care for my grandson. You could offer Buckingham Palace, and she would not return to a man who locked her in a room. Genevieve's face hardened. Then she'll learn how hard single motherhood is. No help from us. I shut the door. Zanea had heard every word from the hallway. I'm not for sale, Mama, she said quietly. That night we sat in Marina Davis's office. The attorney listened without interruption, taking precise notes. Classic coercive control, she concluded. With physical restraint, locking her in. Strong grounds for a protective order. Divorce, child support, custody, all very achievable. The court will favor you given the circumstances. Protective order? Zanea asked, surprised. Exactly. He cannot come within 500 feet of you or the baby. Zanea stared at the table a long time. Toward morning, back at Ida's, she came into the kitchen where I was kneading dough for a 4 a.m. order. I'm filing, she said, voice trembling but resolute. For divorce? I wiped flour from my hands and hugged her, powdering her shirt. I am so proud of you, baby girl. I'm terrified. You are not alone, never alone. Do you hear me? The storm was far from over, but in that moment, under the dim kitchen light, I saw the first flicker of my daughter reclaiming herself. The storm broke fully once the divorce papers were served. Sterling received them at his office downtown, and within hours the harassment began in earnest. Unknown numbers lit up, Zanea's phone at all hours, pleading voicemails promising change. Then furious texts accusing her of betrayal. He created fake social media accounts to message her friends, painting himself as the abandoned husband. His black BMW appeared across the street from Ida's apartment, parked for hours, engine idling while he stared up at our windows. We filed the protective order the next day. A judge signed it within 48 hours. Citing the locking incident, the threats, and the stalking, Sterling was barred from coming within 500 feet of Zanea, me or the baby once born. He fought the order at first, showing up in court polished and repentant, claiming it was all a misunderstanding between a stressed young couple. But Marina Davis laid out the evidence calmly. Screenshots of threatening texts, my sworn statement about the confrontation in the house, Zanea's tearful testimony about being locked in the bedroom while pregnant. The judge's gavel fell like a door slamming shut. Sterling's face as he left the courtroom was gray. For months we lived cautiously. Zanea moved back into the Decatur house, her house, because it felt safer than Ida's apartment, and because she refused to be driven out of the home she had almost lost. I stayed with her most nights, sleeping on the sofa, waking at every unfamiliar sound. We installed Ring cameras, changed the locks, forwarded Sterling's new numbers to Marina. Slowly, the calls tapered off. He had a new girlfriend by then, a 22-year-old fitness trainer with long legs and, crucially, no house of her own and no meddlesome mother. Genevieve proudly introduced her at salon events as the sweet girl who understands family. Little Kazia arrived on a warm April morning at Northside Hospital. The labor was straightforward, 8 hours from first contraction to first cry. I paced the hallway the entire time, praying under my breath. When they finally wheeled Zanea back to the room, she was exhausted but glowing, a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket against her chest. Kezia Vance, she whispered, tears sliding into her hair. Just like we planned. The baby was perfect. Wrinkled rosebud mouth, dark curls already sprouting, tiny fists waving as if greeting the world. I held her and felt something inside me unclench for the first time in years. This child would never know what it felt like to walk on eggshells. Sterling was granted supervised visitation once a week at a neutral center in Dunwoody. At first he showed up on time, bringing expensive rattles and organic onesies. Posing for photos he posted online with captions about daddy time. But the visits grew sporadic, once every 2 weeks, then once a month. By the time Kazia was toddling, he sometimes missed entire months. He told the caseworker he had other priorities now. The new girlfriend didn't like sharing weekends, apparently. The divorce finalized when Kazia was 9 months old. Sterling signed everything without contest, waiving joint custody, agreeing to periodic visits only, and accepting the child support calculation of $200 a month. He was already planning a bigger life with the trainer, talking about moving to Charlotte for a promotion. We had to garnish his wages twice when payments lagged, but after that the money arrived on time. Zenaya's healing was slower, but it was real. She returned to work when Kazia was 8 months old, negotiating full remote status with her firm. Her boss, a woman who had gone through her own messy divorce, told her, "Take the time you need, but know your chair is here." Within a year, Zenaya was promoted to art director, leading a team of younger designers who looked up to her resilience. She made new friends, other mothers from the neighborhood park, from Mommy and Me Yoga, from the library story hour. They formed a group chat that buzzed constantly with playdate plans, recipe swaps, and late-night vents about teething and sleep regression. For the first time in years, Zenaya laughed easily again. The house on Oakview Lane transformed too. Slowly, deliberately, she reclaimed every inch. Books returned to the shelves, art books, novels, children's stories with bright covers. Plants cascaded from macrame hangers in the bay window. Knitted throws in jewel tones draped over the sofa. Walls filled with photographs. Kazia's first smile. Her first steps on the porch. The two of them at the beach in Tybee Island. The three of us at the Atlanta Botanical Garden under the spring azaleas. The kitchen became the heart again. Zenaya baked on weekends, sweet potato pies like I taught her, lemon chess tarts, banana pudding that disappeared before it cooled. The scent of vanilla and brown sugar drifted through the house, the way warmth had once fled it. Years passed like seasons under the oak. We heard through mutual acquaintances that Sterling's second relationship ended the same way the first had. The trainer fled back to her parents in Memphis, citing constant phone checking, forbidden friendships, and rages over small things. Genevieve defended her son publicly. Girls these days are so ungrateful. They don't know a good man when they see one. 3 years after the divorce, Genevieve suffered a massive stroke. She survived, but with partial paralysis and slurred speech. Sterling hired a live-in nurse. He couldn't be bothered to care for her himself. She died a year later in a hospital room, alone except for the duty nurse. The funeral was sparsely attended. Zenaya heard about it from a former colleague of Sterling's. She considered going, then decided against it. "There's no point," she told me quietly. "That woman raised the man who hurt me. She never once saw what she did wrong." Sterling now lives in Genevieve's old condominium off Cascade Road. He works a mid-level IT job, posts rarely on social media. In the few photos that surface, he looks older than his 35 years, hair thinning, eyes tired. Kezia asks about her daddy sometimes. She's 7 now, all braids and curiosity, missing front teeth when she grins. "Why doesn't Daddy come see me?" she asked one morning over pancakes. Zinnia answered honestly, the way we agreed she always would. "Daddy lives separately, Sunshine. He doesn't really know how to be a daddy right now. But that's not because of anything you did. You are perfect exactly as you are." Kezia considered this, syrup on her chin. "Will he ever learn?" "Maybe someday," Zinaya said. "Maybe not. But you are loved so much by me, by Grandma, by Auntie Ida, by all your aunts and cousins. That love is bigger than enough." The oak tree in the front yard has grown even taller, its branches spreading wider each spring. Dogwoods bloom white along the street in March, and in May, the hydrangeas by the fence turn into great purple clouds. On summer evenings, we sit on the porch, Zinaya, Kazia, and me, sipping iced tea while fireflies blink in the dusk. 2 years ago, Zinaya met Langston. He teaches history at Kazia's elementary school. Tall, gentle, recently divorced himself, with a daughter named Maya the same age as Kazia. They met at a parent-teacher conference, bonded over shared frustration with the new math curriculum, and started talking. 6 months in, they're taking it slow. No one is rushing to combine households. But I see the difference. Langston listens when Zinaya speaks. He asks her opinion before making weekend plans. He encourages her art shows, celebrates her promotions, never once suggests she change her style or shrink her dreams to fit his. When the girls play, he sits on the floor building Lego castles beside them. Patient and present, One evening last summer, as the sun dipped gold behind the oak, Zinnia and I sat on the porch swing while Langston pushed the girls on the tire swing he hung from a sturdy branch. With Sterling, she said quietly, I was always shrinking myself so he could feel big, always apologizing for taking up space. But with Langston, I can be fully me, all my colors, all my volume. That's what love is, Mama, when you don't have to shrink. I reached for her hand. I know, baby. I see it. Langston waved from the yard, holding up a pizza box he'd brought. Extra cheese for the girls. Vegetables for us. Dinner's here, he called. Kezia and Maya ran shrieking toward him, hugging his legs. He laughed, steadying the box, and looked over at Zinnia with a softness that needed no words. I watch them now, my daughter whole again, my granddaughter fierce and free, this good man who knows how to love without cages. And I think back to that wedding reception, the apron with its gold embroidery, Sterling's smirk, Genevieve's cold triumph, all those women in unhappy marriages who clapped politely and stayed silent because they had nowhere to go. It wasn't the house that saved Zinnia. It was the knowledge that there was an exit, that she had a choice, that she had a mother who would move heaven and earth and pawn every heirloom, sell every comfort to make sure her child never stood, empty-handed before a man who saw her as property. True love doesn't clip your wings to keep you close. True love gives you wings and the sky to use them. Sometimes those wings look like a folder of legal documents. Sometimes like a craftsman bungalow on a quiet street in Decatur. Sometimes like the courage to walk away when staying costs too much of your soul. Thank God I understood that in time to pass it on. Today Kezia is 7, Maya is 7, the oak is taller than the roof line, and the hydrangeas are bursting purple against the fence. Langston brought pizza again tonight. The girls are chasing the neighbor's cat through the yard, shrieking with laughter. Zinnia pours lemonade, hands me a glass, and sits beside me on the swing. Look at them, Mama, she says softly. I do. I look at my girls, both of them, running free under the wide Georgia sky, and I know with a certainty deeper than bone that every sleepless night at the oven, every sacrificed jewel, every tear I swallowed alone was worth it, because my baby girl has wings, and she is flying.